The big recommendation from what our experience, what we've seen, is that no matter how fancy your technology, it doesn't hide poor underwriting. That is a piece that's fundamental to everything that we do.
The pioneer's story, or the survivor's stories. And we're going to dig a little bit into why you've survived and lessons for the future. So, Envelop, we talked a little bit about what are the lines of business that have proved most effective, and clearly in your case it's cyber, so it's a little bit more about what are the characteristics that have helped you be effective when you've been doing digital, enhanced, augmented underwriting.
Yeah, I mean, easy question to answer in terms of the class of business, because to date, all we've done is cyber, and that may change in the future. But what we liked about cyber was the complexity of a risk, actually. No point running away from that. I think certainly a sentient, adaptive, persistent threat actually really lends itself to machine learning.
What is a sentient, persistent, adaptive threat?
There's a persistent, as in persistent. It's not going away. Adaptive, the risk tomorrow is not the risk yesterday, and that will always be the case, right? So it is a threat which is largely human-driven, but human-driven mapping onto a complex technology stack globally. And the adversary, if you like, which is in the main case, what's driving cyber risk is adapting to defenses, is learning. Trends emerge, new technology, new vectors emerge, which allow the attackers to change their pattern of behavior, exploit new vulnerabilities, but also develop new tools and new forms of cyber threat. So AI actually is very, very useful because it is far more forward-looking in its nature and allows us to sort of have a sort of predator-prey feedback loop, which I don't think you can do with traditional underwriting methods.
So interesting, because I mean, talking to people, that there's a theme around complexity versus simplicity, is a view that the commoditized risks are easier to place in a augmented, enhanced approach. But you're saying you actually prefer the complex one, and that gives you the leadership advantage there. And we can talk a bit more about AI in a minute. Good, Tom. What about you? Where do you sort of stand on this sort of commoditized versus complex? And in a sense,
we've gone for the simple.
Right.
A major product is a US property product. It allows customers to buy down their wind deductible buy down, so to bring their deductibles down. Why it's been set, I think the simplicity of it. It's a simple question set, sort of quote and bind platform, but fundamentally we'd been writing this product for quite a long time before we ever digitalized it, and I think it's the knowledge of the product that has proved so valuable we knew the distribution market, we knew what the client was looking for, and then to digitalize it just supercharged it.
And so just to be all clear on what that distribution and the client is, it's brokers buying it for their clients predominantly in the US?
All in the US, yes.
Okay.
So we've got a number of distribution channels, so we will give access to the UK wholesaler, we'll give it to the US wholesaler, and also we use quite a lot of MGAs as well.
I'm not going to ask you quite the same question, but in terms of the characteristics, you can sort of pick it up from there. Well, you started with a hypothesis. You yourself had a background as Chief Digital Officer for Commoditised. What's been your strategy around where you've chosen the risks to go after to do this?
I guess for us, there's some similarities here. I think what we looked at. My background is property, so it was always going to be a property play. But really within that, because it's so broad, where did we want to focus our efforts? We thought the risk being complex is a massive plus because it gives you that ability to outperform the marketplace by your techniques. But you want the insured interest to be relatively homogenous so that you have a consistency in what you're underwriting each time. So if you're bringing something algorithmic into how you're doing it, you want to be able to say, okay, this risk here is relatively similar to this risk over here, because really what you're doing is, taking a whole population of something and then breaking it down into very, very small categories. And then the final piece is really about volume. So it needs to be a class, an area of business that you're getting significant volumes in so that you're getting that, I guess, that benefit of, if you're automating something compared to a human underwriter taking 5 minutes and you're doing it in 2 seconds, are you also bringing value to how you're doing that? So it needs to be something where you've got a significant volume of business. So for us, the focus was in the US, and it was on surplus lines, and it was in high cat risk properties, which gave us the sort of combination of all three of those.
So it looks simple to the broker to place, but your point being the actual risk profile is quite complicated, and therefore you need to have the strong analytics to get the price right and the risk selection right.
Yeah, exactly. So down a single street, you might have 10 houses that are all identical, but the risk changes as you move down the street because you're next to the coast. So each sort of 20 meters matters, but they're the same houses.
And then Tom, coming back to Opal, so you've been going 8 years now, and you are going through a replatform. Can you talk a little bit about what's sort of evolving with Opal?
So we started this project 10 years ago, and it was very much for a Lloyd's syndicate, proof of concept. It was a bit of a leap of faith, let's say, and we were back to do it. And really the remit was, how do we produce something as cheaply as possible, as quickly as possible? We did it. It was successful. But what then happened was, I think the success got to our heads. It was like, we've produced one product, how do we produce more? So we started putting more and more products onto the system. And probably 3 or 4 years later, we realized any amendments we wanted to make to it, any changes we wanted to make to it, were brutally difficult. And we had to really step back and go, we paused for 2 years. It was 2 years of migrating onto a new platform. We started about a month before lockdown. So I took it on. I will never do that again. It was brutal. But it has given us now we're in a place where we can produce new products very quickly. We can make amendments to those products pretty quickly and cost effectively. And also the API connectivity is there as well. I think it is mentioned that portal fatigue will come. And we're very much portal based. It has meant that we've been able to distribute our products because we can actually hand it to people slightly different to how they've done it. We can give people, and they don't need to have any money spent on the technology. They can come to us straight away. But we also realize as it's evolving, there is that more of that technology, and we need to be able to offer that to our clients.
And those people are, I might answer that last point, they're the brokers that are actually buying the products, so they can just log in and get a Opal.
So I'll never go direct to client. This will always be done through the intermediaries.
Right, but your point about they don't need
they'll log in, yes.
Technology, they just, okay. Jonathan, you touched on that AI point there. You right from the beginning, and I suppose you had the advantage of, because of greenfield when you started Envelop, and right from the beginning I remember that we still called it AI in those days, or maybe called it machine learning. How do you keep evolving yourselves? How are you staying ahead now, whereas other people are getting access to tools to do what you've been doing for a while?
Yeah, I think a couple of things spring to mind. One is, at the heart of our business is a flywheel of data, effectively. So the more data we got, the more business we were able to underwrite. We have a no data, no deal rule, which we're kind of famous for. So if you're not sharing data with us, we just don't trade with you. And the more data meant more business then meant more data. And actually that's the way a business like ours develops a little bit of a moat around it. It's probably possible, but not easy to immediately arrive and recreate that from scratch. So it's taken us pretty much 10 years to get to that point. I think we have been from day one really using AI. So people talk about it, we've always done it. So I think we've underwritten quite something over $1 billion of business now. Every dollar has been underwritten using an AI technique to some degree. And the original origins, as you say, were kind of good old-fashioned AI, machine learning, mostly machine learning, sort of supervised machine learning techniques, which had been very well grounded in defense and aerospace and space, which is where we got data scientists from originally. There weren't really people in the industry that were doing what we wanted to do, so we looked to another industry to achieve that. But we've certainly been very open to adopting other forms of AI. And I suppose most recently, modeling based on LLM, generative AI, we now have in use a few different use cases, but certainly name matching, which is an incredibly dull topic, but actually incredibly important in reinsurance. You actually need to know what your exposure is. And time again, reinsurers don't know what their exposure is because they've incorrectly labeled, or they've missed gaps, or frankly just missed exposure with data entry and kind of garbage in, garbage out. The other area which I think a few people here have been experimenting in and talking about is just in cleaning and scrubbing the data and actually submissions and getting the submission data we need. And I think really important takeaway for reinsurance as well as insurance, that most of the submission process is unstructured. What comes in the document at the end of it from a broker is not the whole story. And this is a hugely iterative process, and actually using LLM-based modeling has really allowed us to get our heads around just how unstructured so much of that is, but begin to pull more and more insight from the submissions and the other dialogue that goes on around the reinsurance placement.
Yeah, certainly been one of the areas we're seeing a lot of interest in. A lot of companies now doing some great things in that, helping clean up the dirty data and the unstructured data. So Marek, just to give people a sort of takeaway from this, and you can sort of choose any of the constituents you like in terms of who you think might be the most influential in this market. But what are your recommendations? You've been quite encouraged, I think, in the audience actually tonight. People have been talking about this for probably, as Robin said, 2000 onwards. It does seem we're getting somewhere now. There's commitment by the major brokers to do this. But for what are the sort of as advice to your recommendations to really see this actually now moving forward and to make London an advantage and a cheaper place to do business?
I suppose the big recommendation from what our experience, what we've seen, is that no matter how fancy your technology, it doesn't hide poor underwriting. That is a piece that's fundamental to everything that we do.
And how's the role of the underwriter changing with the use of these platforms?
I suppose what I see is a shift from sort of generalist to specialist in terms of what you need. And if you think that sort of, if you've built an algorithmic setup and at the heart of your business is this algorithm that's essentially serviced by humans, kind of thing, in that kind of slightly sort of dystopian flipped over way, what that means is that sort of people who would be maybe considered in a traditional world to be very sort of back office actually end up having a role which is highly decision making, highly relevant for how we underwrite day to day. So it's sort of, I think it's quite good, sort of empowering way to bring people to the fore in decision making roles in the industry.
And different ways to grow into the role of an underwriter. Advice or requests, and again, you can choose your constituents in the market for you directing.
It was mentioned earlier, culture of making the mistakes to then get the lessons to learn from there, I think is key. And one of the areas that we have definitely experienced is producing products the market wants to buy, not what you want to sell. We've definitely suffered from that, and we've produced a couple of products that just flop because of it.
They were quite innovative though, so I think I still recommend you trying some new things. Jonathan, again, same question for you: advice and recommendations.
I steer clear of giving advice and recommendations. I'll make a sort of general prediction that I think the more we invest and work together as a community to begin to extract the real value of AI, not just in our distribution models, but also in terms of underwriting decision making, I think the industry will benefit from that. And more, I think capital is flowing and capital is being allocated based on decisions which are, if not automated, then highly informed by the use of AI. And I think long may that continue.
AI harnessed with good data. Well, that's a great place to end. So Jonathan, Tom, Marek, thank you very much.
Thank you.